Hey guys, what's up? Majestic Gaming here, and today I'm going to be talking about every single mainline Halo FPS game. I realized I never actually had my thoughts up on the channel of the older Halo games, so I finally wanted to do that. I'm just going to go through the campaign and multiplayer of each one and talk about what I like and what I dislike. And there will also be timestamps in the description below if you want to hear about a specific game. So I actually didn't play Halo Combat Evolved for the first time until the Anniversary Edition released all the way back in 2011, after I'd already played some of the later campaigns. And yeah, I liked it. There were things I really enjoyed, but also one or two missions I really just didn't love playing through, but I'm going to go through it kind of looking back on today in 2018. Obviously, you can't ignore the impact it had on the industry as a whole, and the way it innovated in many different aspects of graphics, console FPSs, gameplay, story, and more, and you also just really can't compare the graphics, but the originals don't look as bad as you might think, and even though the Anniversary graphics are a little bit too inspired from Reach for my taste, I like them for the most part. The music is obviously beautiful and fantastic all throughout the campaign, and continues to be throughout the series, and even playing this 10 years later, I was still invested in the parts of the story that I didn't know how they were going to turn out. The characters are likable, have their own moments, and some like Johnson are just way more entertaining than they actually needed to be. And also, Halo is just a cool concept. The idea of these huge ring worlds built by an ancient civilization, then exploring it as a super soldier in cool armor, is just a lot of fun. A lot happens in the narrative, but it does stay pretty simple, and it progresses as it goes along, and playing for the first time and every time after thoroughly entertains me. Throughout the campaign, there's also a nice variety of stealth, on-foot, vehicle, and fun action set pieces. Pillar of Autumn serves as a great introduction to the Covenant, which are masterfully done on a design level, and it just introduces you to the characters and a whole different elements of gameplay. I do feel like the first half of the campaign is just really well done overall. The free, awesome, sprawling sandbox design of Halo and exploring around that mission is just a lot of fun. Truth and Reconciliation had some cool stealth moments, and fighting on the actual ship was awesome, and the silent cartographer visually looks really cool, and the non-stop feeling of storming the beach never gets old. Even Assault on the Control Room, which I feel outstays its welcome a little bit, has really fun and engaging vehicle sections, and fun weapons to find. Moving on to the second half of the campaign, I definitely don't hate it, but there's no ignoring the reuse of rooms and assets from earlier levels. It's still really enjoyable and features some awesome moments, even though it does start to drag a little bit. The introduction of the Flood through the first-person cutscene is perfect, and Guilty Spark in all the cutscenes is just a fun and entertaining character, and obviously the Warthog run at the very end of the game at the mall is just an awesome masterpiece. So if you have not played this campaign yet, then I think you're really doing yourself a disservice, because it does have a fantastic experience to go along with it, even when it starts to drag a little bit in the second half. Now, the Halo CE multiplayer is something I never really had a huge investment in. I was too young to play when it initially released with my friends, but yeah, obviously it's incredibly important when it comes to how it affected the series later, and all first-person shooters even to this day. You can still play custom games on Combat Evolved through the MCC, if you can actually get it to work and have a great time with it. The gameplay still feels surprisingly solid 17 years later, and it's still a blast to play with your friends. Most of the maps are really well done, unique, and will probably stick with you, which is something that kind of went away from the series later, so that kind of sucks, but in this game they're really well done. Some of the melee combat can be kind of weird, especially playing today, and spawning is pretty horrible, especially on the MCC. But it still has a great variety of modes and vehicles for a first game in a series, and are a great time to play around with your friends. So overall, multiplayer is incredibly well done and can still be played to this day. It's not my favorite Halo multiplayer just because there are others where I can find myself becoming less frustrated playing today, but Halo Combat Evolved though is nearly a perfect game, and you really can't ignore the significance of what it's done. We wouldn't have console shooters the way we do today, and might not even have the Xbox. So overall, Halo CE is a very solid experience that surprisingly still holds up to this day. I actually played Halo 2 around 2011, I think, right after I finished CE, and I thought it was pretty good. And after finally getting to play the multiplayer in Master Chief Collection, I enjoyed it, and really there's no ignoring the importance of it similar to Combat Evolved. The remastered graphics of the beautiful blur cutscenes and of just the maps, multiplayer, and campaign look fantastic, and from a visual style may actually be my favorite Halo game. The campaign I actually don't love, but I can still admit that it's awesome and has a lot of great moments. The music is awesome as well, as we have the new Mjolnir mix, which is the definition of perfection, and the story is definitely one of my favorites in this series, and the way it compares the Arbiter and Chief in the opening cutscenes is very well done, and pretty much everything about the way their stories progress separately, and when they finally come together is awesome. Very similar to Halo CE, it also keeps you engaged even with the introduction of new characters, such as Miranda, Keyes, and Tartarus. That's all very well done. I personally just really enjoyed the whole Covenant Schism story with the Brutes and Tartarus, and really enjoyed watching that play out. I also just enjoyed the Arbiter's transition to turning against the Prophets that had already betrayed him, as it felt natural and not really forced. It is kind of sad that the narrative does abruptly stop at the end of the game, due to all the production issues with Bungie, but that really doesn't take anything away from me, and that last moment with Chief is just so cool I can't really hate it. So from a story and narrative standpoint, I really adore this game. Now moving on to the missions themselves, this is where I don't love it as much. Obviously, I don't need to dwell on this too much, but yeah, Legendary is incredibly broken, and for the most part just a horrible, horrible experience. But in normal, there is still a lot of fun to be had. I love the different stages of Cairo Station and how the mission progresses, in addition to the freedom it offers, especially when you go outside the station and are able to just explore wherever you want. Outskirts is fun enough, and Metropolis I actually really love. Vehicle combat in this entire franchise is really entertaining, pretty much in every single game, and driving down the bridge in the Scorpion is just such a cool feeling, and the dynamic Scarab fight you have at the end of the mission is also really awesome. And when it comes to playing as the Arbiter, I think it's really cool. It's different having the Covenant as your allies, and it's just unique enough for it to work, and for most of the missions, I really enjoy it. Even the stuff with the Heretic I also really enjoy, because I've always liked him, and the fight is decent enough. I also enjoy the addition of the Brutes, even if sometimes it got really annoying and kind of just broken to fight. Delta Halo is also great, and then we get to Regret, which just kind of overstays its welcome for me. It's filled with Sniper Jackals, which are horrible, especially on Legendary, and it has a kind of stupid boss fight at the end, but there is a certain charm to it that I think you have to love, and that just makes it a lot of fun, sitting on Regret's chair beating him to death over and over and over. Then Quarantine Zone and Gravemind I both don't love. They kind of blend together for me, and they seem just somewhat generic, especially Gravemind on Legendary being one of the worst gaming experiences I've ever had in my life. It's horrible. Again, that's not to say there aren't cool moments in this campaign, but overall, I don't love it. And sort of moving towards the end of the campaign, the Great Journey is again a pretty solid mission filled with awesome character moments. It's definitely not as memorable as Combat Evolved's ending, but still cool. And we have the Tartarus boss fight, which like the Regret fight feels kind of stupid going back today, but it's serviceable and like I said has a certain amount of charm to it. So overall, I like Halo 2's campaign. The story is way more engaging than I expected it to be, and most of the missions are a blast to play through, even except for the ones that you're on Legendary, and for a couple of them I just don't love overall. Now moving on to the multiplayer, I haven't played a ton of the original, but I played a decent amount of Anniversary, and I like them both. I don't love playing it today, and it's fine, and I completely understand why people really enjoy this multiplayer. Even more than Halo CE, Halo 2 truly innovated when it came to online gaming and first-person shooters, and you have to give it credit for that. Many of the maps are really well known and for good reason, as they're fun, well-balanced, and actually creative and dynamic, such as Zanzibar being one of my favorites. Similar to Halo CE, it also controls pretty well and feels good, even though sometimes it does come across a little slow today. Also like Combat Evolved, spawning is pretty bad and can bring down games you're playing in. Dual wielding was an awesome addition, and it just truly improved on everywhere CE could be upgraded. Again, there's not much to say, but yeah, it's a great multiplayer experience that includes a nice variety of game modes, maps, vehicles, and other new additions. So yeah, I really like Halo 2. There's no denying its importance, and there is still some fun to be had in it today. But I also lack the personal experience with the game, since I didn't play it around release that I have with some of the later Halo games. Overall, Halo 2 I would consider a great game though. I'm going to start off with the fact that Halo 3 is my favorite Halo game ever made. It was the first game where I played around release, and I just have awesome memories with it. It was one of my two favorite campaigns in the series, and by far my favorite multiplayer. I don't really need to defend what I would just about consider a masterpiece of a game, but let's talk about the campaign. Even though I wasn't really a huge Halo fan at the time, I love this campaign. It's fantastic. I think it's a perfect length, and I actually remember every mission, and they each have multiple awesome moments that are truly memorable. The graphics even today still look pretty good for the most part, and obviously the music once again is incredible, with my favorite track being Never Forget, the beautiful menu music that I'm sure you've seen or heard of. It's great. The story actually comes across a little more simplified this time, and while it's not fantastic, there's no problem with it. This is where Halo feels more like, yeah, let's take out these scarabs, save the world, awesome music playing, ooh, it's all that kind of stuff. It's not the narrative engaged stuff that Halo 2 is really about. I was still thoroughly engaged though with this, and I actually remember this being the first Halo game I'd ever played. I was a little confused, but I even remember how cool thinking the cutscenes were from just a basic cinematic level. Basically, when I think of this game, I just remember all the awesome moments like reuniting with Cortana and Johnson's death, just witnessing the progression of the Arbiter being your fully best bud now, and even becoming a co-op playable character with Chief was awesome. So for the most part, this felt like a natural progression from Halo 2. Again, I said for the most part, we don't really know how he got off the ship, and I guess he jumped out and then landed in the desert, or in the jungle, whatever. For the most part, it felt like a natural progression, and was definitely a satisfying end, for me, to this trilogy. So moving on to the missions themselves, like I said, they're all memorable and save for one are all really enjoyable. I didn't hate there not being any elites to fight, but there is a little something missing without them there. Also, the moments when Cortana appears on screen are super annoying and just unnecessary. I think that's one of the worst decisions they made when it came to this campaign, but it really doesn't ruin the entire experience for me. Sierra 117 basically serves as a reintroduction, but also has some fun gameplay sections where you have the freedom to approach them how you want. I've played this campaign countless times now, and I always find a new way or a new weapon to fight, and it really just adds replayability. Crow's Nest initially wasn't one of my favorite missions, but replaying it is actually a really good time. Especially when the Halo Marine theme kicks in and you're mowing down waves of jackals in the hangar, it's pretty satisfying. Salvo Highway is also awesome, just non-stop action fun that I could probably play every day and not get bored. The Storm is also awesome just due to the variety of approaching the Scarab fights, and just like Halo 2, there's so much freedom in how you do it, it's even more fun if you have a friend. Floodgate is also great, and I remember being kind of scared the first time I played this, and also thinking how much fun it was to fight the Flood again, and for the most part, I feel the same way. The arc is incredible and probably Halo 3's longest mission, but unlike some Halo 2 missions, it doesn't drag and is constantly changing it up. You go from moving with a squad of ODSTs to getting a Warthog, then finally getting a Scorpion. I also just adore the moment when the forward onto Dawn arrives, and the debris and vehicles are flying all over the place. It just feels so dynamic and more like you, the player, actually have a purpose in this story. The Scorpion section is a blast, but then gets cut short when you enter the facility that Guilty Spark opens, and to my surprise you get back in them just a second later to fight more dynamic Scarabs, and it's awesome, and I can't say enough great things about this campaign, because it just offers so much in only 10 missions that you you probably won't find in most longer campaigns today. Then the Covenant is absolute perfection and tied for my favorite mission in the series. Controlling the Hornets feels great and was actually a huge surprise to me originally. The complete freedom you have on where you can go honestly blew my mind, and still does to this day. Then the reveal that the Flood are helping you in that same mission, the music, the cinematography, Truth's death, even with his weird voice actor change, whatever, everything is perfect, and yeah, if you've played it, then you know it's great. Now Cortana is another mission I initially really hated playing through, but replaying it was actually a lot of fun. Even on Legendary, I don't hate it that much. The Flood for me just feel a lot better in this game, and the game I think controls a little bit better than say Halo CE, which is why I just still don't really love playing the library, because fighting the Flood in that game still I don't love enjoying. But overall, it's fine. Then Halo is just pure awesomeness and a great ending to this trilogy. Johnson's death actually has feels, and you're actually motivated to go finish the fight, and you're inspired, and it just feels awesome. And the Warthog run is beautiful, and I love the way the debris isn't just in the distance, but that's actually there, and surprises you and can actually kill you unexpectedly. And the music is just awesome, and such a fantastic ending that I still cannot take my eyes off of to this day. Even the legendary ending cutscene with the best friend nod to the Arbiter, and the image of Chief and Cortana in the Dawn while Installation 4B explodes under them, is just a great ending to this trilogy. And the legendary ending is awesome, and for me just a super satisfying way to end this trilogy, while also leaving the door open for more in the future. So yeah, in case you can't tell, I'm absolutely in love with this campaign. Everything is great, the art style of Chief, the weapons, the Covenant, and everything just looks so iconic, and I don't think there will really ever be a Halo campaign like Halo 3's. Hopefully we'll get that with Halo 6, probably not, but it is just so much fun and memorable, and I can't recommend you playing it enough. Moving on to the multiplayer, it is so good. It's definitely my favorite out of the original trilogy, since I honestly was never a huge fan of Halo 2 or Halo CE's multiplayer, and I never really feel an urge to go play that today, but Halo 3 I definitely do. It was the first Halo multiplayer I played, and while I wasn't an avid fan at the time, I've come to really enjoy it. Even in the last couple of weeks, I've been playing it more and more lately, and it's just so incredibly fun, even over 10 years later. Even some of the things I thought I'd be worried about, such as it being kinda slow, just aren't a problem, and it feels and controls so well. The maps continue to look great and play great with not as much variety it seems, but it still works out well. Just 2 weeks ago I played a game of Capture the Flag on Snowbound, I believe, and it was honestly some of the most fun I've had playing a game by myself in a while. The amount of interesting maps in the game is just crazy, from Valhalla to Sandtrap and Snowbound. The vehicle additions, mainly the Hornet and the Chopper, are awesome, and added a whole new layer to the multiplayer that was fresh and unique, and the new weapons were also cool and creative like the Grav Hammer. And like I said, this being the first Halo game I played, I never had a huge problem with some of the changes they made, like with the BR that other people had. I didn't really care because this was obviously my first game. However, probably my favorite thing about Halo 3's multiplayer was its community focus and creativity. Being able to forge your own maps and come up with your own modes was insane, and I remember playing that for the first time in Halo 3 4, just having my mind blown. The wide variety of cool game modes just added on to that, and the Spartan customization and ranking system really just encourage you to play and keep going, and it's one of the most well done things in this multiplayer. Theater mode was also really fun and just added more variety to how you share your progress in the game, and obviously you can't ignore the pure level of community excitement and engagement at this time in the Halo community, and that's something that cannot be easily achieved. The multiplayer is one of the best FPS multiplayer packages that you will find, and it truly remains an incredible amount of fun and was just so well done all the way back in 2007 and filled to the brim with variety. So in case you can't tell, I'm absolutely in love with this game. It's one of my favorites of all time. The only thing I really don't love are some instances during the campaign. The Forge move control is a little weird today, and that's about it. I wasn't even a huge Halo fan at the time when this released, but I still heavily enjoyed it, and only wished I played it more at the time. But it still remains one of the best and most influential games of the last generation. I'm not going to spend as much time on ODST as the other games just because there's not as much to talk about, but I do really love this game. I honestly don't think I played this until it released on the MCC, but since then I've played it a couple times, and it's a lot of fun. I enjoy the atmosphere and the tone of the game way more than I initially thought I would, and the soundtrack of course continues to be great, especially that main menu track I really love. And while I wasn't super invested in the story, I enjoyed it. I think it lived up to what it needed to be for the most part, and the highlight was definitely the characters and their interactions with each other. I really enjoyed Veronica and Buck and all their screen time they had together, and I also thought it was cool how the story kind of took place during Halo 2 and before Halo 3. I thought that was really neat. I also really like the tone, like I said, of this game, as it feels very different in addition to the actual gameplay differences, such as having less health and using the night vision. It's a cool concept and done pretty well for the most part, in addition to the hub world that you could explore that was filled with enemies, mongooses, and audio logs that told their own story. That was really cool. So yeah, the missions themselves are also a great time, and just like the mainline Halo games, have some really cool Halo-esque moments. The Mossa Street sections, I already said, are pretty entertaining, and a cool idea for the most part, and most of the missions too are pretty cool, and while only a few really stand out, they're all enjoyable and none really get boring. While some like Tayari Plaza are a little generic, others such as Uplift Reserve, Oni Alpha Site, and Coastal Highway are just a blast. One of my personal favorites is NMPDHQ, just because the areas you fight your way through are fun enough, but when you cross the beam and hold down the LZ for the Phantom, it's a great time. Like I said, ODST has a really different tone and visuals, and that combined with the great music and variety of weapons on the rooftop is just so much fun. And while there's not too much to Kekawani Station, escorting the Phantom with the Banshee is just really entertaining. So yeah, ODST's campaign is great. It's not my personal favorite, but it tried some new things that definitely made the experience better for it. The story and characters are also more engaging than I thought they would be, and it's still worth playing to this day. Since there's no PvP multiplayer, it's worth pointing out that Firefight was initially included here, and it's fun. I've only played it a couple times, and compared to Reach it feels pretty bare bones and simple, but this was its first appearance, and obviously it's still fun. There were a nice variety of maps from the campaign, and it felt and played like Halo. So yeah, obviously that's about it for ODST. It's not a mainline game, so you wouldn't expect as much from it, but it's still delivered and has a unique feel to it that you won't find anywhere else. It's got a great entertaining campaign in addition to a fun firefight mode that all comes together to create a great experience that I would definitely recommend you playing if you have not already. I absolutely love Halo Reach. I cannot express to you how much I incredibly love this game. I love everything about it. There's only a couple things I don't love. It may actually be my second favorite game in the series. It's got a lot of great elements with some questionable additions, but we'll get there. I believe I played this in early 2011, so it had already been out for a while, but I vividly remember my first playthrough and it was awesome. So let's go ahead and get the story out of the way, because I know that's what some people's biggest issue is with this game. I want to stress that I had not finished the Fall of Reach book before I played this. I was actually in the middle of reading it. I do really like that book, but I played this all, and all I knew was that you weren't following Master Chief. That's about it. I just want to say that the graphics do look great, and even today they have a nice appeal to them. I also personally don't have a huge problem with the art style as I know some other people do. I enjoy the sort of more grittier military-esque style it was going for, and I think it all worked out. And also the story, I really enjoy. Now, are Noble Team somewhat generic characters? Yes. But that really didn't bring anything down for me. I enjoyed watching them all interact, and even though they didn't have much development in the campaign themselves, you understood them and what they were about, and you also began to care about them as the story progressed. Aside from Noble Team, the setting of Reach was just super interesting. You knew this was the final defense of humanity before Earth, and just to play through all of that was really engaging. And I just loved the way it played right in Halo CE, and where we picked up during that game, it was awesome. And I didn't really care about the location and date discrepancies just because it didn't really matter to me. And similar to Halo 3, it was also just filled with amazing moments and beautiful looking cutscenes that I really enjoy. And yeah, I know the cool looking scenes don't make a story, but it emphasizes what's going on in the story, and for me it really does matter. And this is also probably my personal favorite Halo game when it comes to mission variety and what you do in each one. I enjoy that first cutscene where you get your first basic info on Noble Team, and Winter Contingency is my least favorite mission in the game, but it does provide a decent introduction of the new enemies and the new gameplay mechanics. But after that, every mission is just so varied and incredibly well done. Owning Sword Base is a great time, and using the target designator for the first time was surprisingly fun. And like I said, the atmosphere and music is apparent throughout the entire campaign, and it just feels unique. Nightfall is a fun throwback to Truth and Reconciliation from Halo CE, and Tip of the Spear is a great mission. I love it that it's just so varied, and fighting your way up to the spire is great and super rewarding. Another thing I love about Tip of the Spear is the complete kind of tonal change it has right when that frigate's destroyed. After that, the entire campaign just feels very somber and depressing, and this only continues after George dies in Long Night of Solace, which was super sad. And yeah, the variety just continues as we go from defending a base to storming the beach, then flying the broadsword around, and when I first played it, it blew my mind with how many things the campaign was hitting on. Exodus is also a mission I just really loved because I thought it was super memorable with the jetpacks and the brutes and the city setting overall. I just thought it was cool how the objectives were different than kill everything. Unlike other games in the series, you're not aggressively going to kill the company, you're trying to save who and what you can before the entire planet's glassed. The New Alexandria is absolutely beautiful with a great sense of tone, somber music, awesome cinematics, and just a great sandbox level where you can do what you want when you want, as it's very reminiscent of the Covenant. Then skipping to the end, Lone Wolf is an awesome end and appropriate ending to this game. I love how different and kind of unexpected that last mission is, as it just felt like such an appropriate ending to this campaign, and it's just great. So yeah, I can talk about this campaign for hours as there's so much great stuff in it, and I just love it so much. I do feel that it may actually be better than Halo 3's campaign just because of the pure amount of variety and the different things it hit on. So Reach's multiplayer was the first in the series I actually played a lot of, and at the time I really enjoyed it. Looking back on it, there are a lot of aspects I like, but also some things I wish hadn't been included. This was the first game where the movement system really started to change, and I didn't hate the new change of loadouts with the different armor abilities, and some of them were pretty fun to play around with. However, I think most would agree that it did ruin the arena-based equal footing in Slayer matches and made balancing of maps a pain for Bungie. I actually really enjoy so many of the maps in the game, and even though there wasn't a huge amount at launch, when I think of awesome big team battle maps, Reach instantly comes to mind. Even though a lot of the cool arena maps were just forged remakes of the older games maps, they were still fun to play around with and not a downside to me at all. Spire and Boneyard are two of my personal favorites, with Courtyard being a great map for infection, and I enjoyed many of the new vehicles such as the Revenant and especially the Falcon, even though it unnecessarily removed great vehicles that were added in Halo 3. It's also a similar thing with weapons where they added in awesome ones like the Plasma Launcher and the Grenade Launcher, but they also removed the Battle Rifle, SMG, and lots of others. Obviously, Halo 5 took some inspiration with the Spartan abilities and armor lock I don't even hate, but when gunfights are just completely stopped from them, I'm not a fan. This was the first Halo game that didn't really feel as much like a Halo game, but I still love it for so many reasons. This game by far has the most amount of content out of any Halo game, and the huge variety of competitive and cooperative multiplayer modes such as Invasion was insane. I could play this game for hours on end in just tons of different competitive modes. I also just love playing Firefight, and the fact that it was fully customizable was something that definitely needs to be in Halo 6 and was probably one of the best and most defining aspects of that game. It just added so much variety, and you could play Firefight only your entire life and still have a fresh experience probably every single time. Armor customization was also fantastic with the pure amount of detail you could change, in addition to the credit system, which I think works really well. Also, this forge is fantastic. I remember spending hours with my friends on Forge World, which was just beautiful and awesome, just messing around with all the different things you could do. So yeah, overall, I absolutely love this multiplayer. It made some decisions concerning movement that angered many people, but personally for me, I really enjoyed the changes and how they, in addition to the absurd amount of content, come together to form this awesome multiplayer experience that really stands out. Again, I know like complete Halo purists for the original trilogy aren't going to love this, but for me, I get where they're coming from, but personally, I just still really enjoy it. And this game as a whole is awesome. The campaign is fantastic and the best for mission variety, and the multiplayer is awesome and just a lot of fun and the best for pretty much content variety. It's definitely my second favorite Halo game and one that I can definitely still play to this day. Alright, Halo 4, 343's first game and the biggest deviation from the series yet. This was truly the first Halo game where I was insanely excited. I remember keeping up with the news of the new weapons, where Chief was going, what were the Prometheans, and watching that awesome reveal trailer for the first time. I went to the midnight launch and bought the limited edition, so yeah, I'm pretty biased towards this game as it does have a special place in my heart. And do I still like it? Yeah, I do. It's got some many questionable elements in the multiplayer, some in the campaign, and the story is something that's kind of been heavily debated for years now with people seemingly changing their thoughts, and yeah, I do really like Halo 4's story. I definitely remember thinking it felt different than the previous games, and Master Chief just felt different as a person, but I enjoyed it. I liked how it focused on him and Cortana's relationship, and just more on Master Chief. He felt like an actual character, and I like Bungie making him a blank slate than anyone could be, but I also like having a real character that 343 made a little bit more. And everything just including Chief and Cortana in the campaign I really like. Cortana's rampancy was just pretty compelling, and especially that last scene with them is great, and I just really enjoyed seeing this kind of other side of Halo stories, and some of the other characters like Lasky were cool. And I also enjoyed the part that Del Rio did play in the campaign. Obviously he's just there to hate him, and Palmer also isn't very likable and kind of bland, and she still sucks, so they didn't do a very good job on that. But I also enjoyed the Didact for the most part, and I thought he was menacing, especially after he composed that entire facility near Installation 03, and when he composes New Phoenix at the end. I thought that was pretty cool and menacing as a good like kind of villain thing to do. And I was kind of disappointed though when it came to Requiem. While there were some cool elements of the setting explored, I do feel like there was some wasted potential, and especially since it gets end up being driven into the sun at the end of Spartan Ops, it sucks we'll never really get to see that again. And just like the older games, it does have some of those awesome Halo moments scattered through the campaign, not as much as the original games, but a decent amount. And while I do very much enjoy the story, playing the campaign itself is where the game is not as strong. The graphics do look really good, and while the music isn't as consistently great as the other games, there are some amazing tracks like 117 and Arrival. So I remember playing Dawn for the first time and thinking how great the graphics looked, and yeah, it's a fun enough mission. It is cool getting the BR back after its absence in Halo Reach, even if it does sound weird and look weird and just different. Whatever, that's the whole art style change. Same with Requiem, it's pretty entertaining, and exploring the structures with the great music playing feels really ominous and is well done. You also have motivation for completing the mission after your scene with Cortana, her explaining her rampancy, you have to get back to Earth to find Halsey, all that was pretty good, and Forerunner is also pretty memorable just because it's the introduction of the Prometheans, and yeah, the Prometheans aren't very well designed or fun to find in Halo 4's missions. The Crawlers don't have much to them, and the Watchers, while a cool idea, don't offer a ton of variety in the way encounters go. And the Knights are just awful. They're kind of broken, they're unpredictable, and they just don't come across as well balanced in the environments that they're placed in, and they're just not fun to fight. Reclaimer is a mission that really stands out because of the Mammoth, and it is really cool. Having the sections where you can leave the Mammoth however you want with all the Spartan 4s and all the different armor abilities that they had on the Mammoth is really cool, and it just has a nice level of freedom that the rest of the campaign really lacks. And Shutdown is also a mission I kind of have mixed thoughts on. It's clearly taking influence from New Alexandria, but it's just not the same. Being able to finally fly a Pelican should have been really cool, but the combat wasn't nearly as fun as it should have been, and it just didn't feel very unique. The atmosphere wasn't really there. It had a cool kind of aesthetic around it, but again, it wasn't good enough to really justify the entire mission, making it a lot of fun. And mainly just the thing that really brought that entire mission down was the on-foot stuff, which is really, really boring. And Midnight I actually really like. I really like the broadsword kind of run at the beginning. I don't think it's the broadsword, but you know, the ship run at the beginning with 117 playing, and even though the mission design itself is pretty generic and you're fighting Prometheans, which for the most time sucks, it just feels fun and the story motivation is there with great music. So yeah, I like Halo 4's campaign. I'll still play through it any day. The story is one of the most engaging for me of the series, and while the campaign is a little bland from a gameplay and mission standpoint, it's still pretty fun to play through, even with all of its faults today. Now, the Halo 4 multiplayer I think can be best described as confused. It has to be said that I absolutely loved it when it first released, just because it was the first Halo multiplayer I was really, really invested in. but looking back on it, I can still have fun, basically because it's really easy, and yeah, it's not great. The biggest change I think is probably the inclusion of customizable loadouts, which, yeah, no, don't do that in Halo. Don't get me wrong, I love them in custom games, but that completely destroys any type of balance that you have in arena play. They also affects the maps themselves, and sometimes you have no reason to go look for certain weapons if you have them in your loadout. I think the perfect example is the plasma pistol in Big Team Battle. You just have to go search for one or two of them on the map. Being able to always spawn with a weapon that can stop other vehicles in Big Team Battle is just stupid and broken, and I hate it. And the multiplayer is just really similar to Call of Duty in all the worst ways, like ordnance drops and loadouts. And like I said, it's fun, but yeah, I can recognize it's just pretty broken and stupid. I enjoyed the introduction of the Mantis, but it is stupid they took out all the other air vehicles besides the Banshee, and the weapons are just a disaster. 90% of all the Promethean weapons are just worse carbon copies of the UNSC versions. Same with some of the Covenant weapons like the Storm Rifle, which is only there to try and balance out the loadouts as much as possible with each other. And while I do really love the Sticky Detonator, that was one of the few cool additions they made in that game, and I do wish it would return in Halo 6. There were some cool ideas in the armor abilities like Promethean Vision and the Sentry Turret. Those were kinda cool ideas, but still, loadouts kinda ruined them in the multiplayer. And there was a decent amount of game modes and some cool new introductions like Dominion, which I really liked, and while there is a suitable amount of maps, a lot of them are just terrible and poorly designed, with me absolutely hating Solace. However, there were some really cool maps like Haven, Exile, and Ragnarok. I did think that Forge was pretty good, not Halo Reach good, but decent. It was pretty inexcusable though that there wasn't a dedicated Forge canvas at launch. I have an insane amount of time put into custom games in Halo 4, so I have a soft spot for them, and yeah, I think they're a lot of fun, especially since I have just a lot of great memories with me and my friends playing Halo 4 custom games. But I did love having customizable loadouts in the custom games, since you can make some really fun game modes. On the flip side, however, there were some terrible decisions related to custom games, such as Infection, where they only used the Flood player models and you only had swords and it just ruined everything and was awful. I did really enjoy the customization though, and specifically remembered working to get the amount of splatters I needed to get the green Verdant visor, and looking back on that, especially after Halo 5, I really appreciate that. So Spartan Ops is also fine, and I did enjoy the story, and at least felt like it kinda actually mattered in the long run, especially with Halsey having her arm gone. However, the missions themselves were extremely repetitive and kinda boring. It also sucked that you just play on the locations that were just ripped right from the campaign. It wasn't even close to an acceptable replacement for Firefight. So yeah, Halo 4's multiplayer at least tried to be a different game, and went about it by copying Call of Duty and making many bad decisions concerning gameplay. Overall, I like Halo 4. I have great memories with it, so it's really hard for me to separate that, but it has a great story, decent missions, and just a confused multiplayer overall. Alright, Halo 5. I know this game has been discussed and talked about to death over the last few years, and I just want to say that I was really excited and kept track of this game as much as I could leading up to its release, and you can see that just from the videos on this channel. But the graphics look technically pretty good, especially today on the Xbox One X, and the soundtrack is decent with some great tracks like The Trials really being the only one. The idea of introducing a new protagonist, the first Halo game on next gen, and finally seeing Blue Team in the game should have been awesome, but the story, as it's well known, is pretty bad. Starting with the characters, they tried to shove way too many in the game, and it just really hurt the story. They give you no reason to care about any of Osiris. I don't care if Tanaka's backstory wasn't an issue of Halo Escalation. We should have had that in the game or been able to play through it or something, at least had something to let us make her care about her, but no, there was none of that, and really the only character who was already established was Buck, and he doesn't even really feel like his ODST counterpart, and even though Blue Team is also established, they're just really bland and uninteresting. The whole idea of Chief thinking Cortana's alive and trying to go find her isn't a terrible idea, but the story that the marketing was selling just seems pretty interesting, with Chief going AWOL and Hunt the Truth, and all of that was set up for such a great premise that it just sucks to see it turn out the way it did. Even the Chief and Locke fight we were promised and really all anticipating was pretty pathetic and a huge letdown, and the side characters were also pretty boring like Palmer and Halsey, and the Arbiter's new look was great and he was fine for the time he was there, but it was just so short and underwhelming. And don't even get me started on Jul 'Mdama and how he got killed off. I remember thinking with my friends for years we were waiting for the Jul 'Mdama Arbiter Energy Sword fight, but no, he gets killed off in the first mission because Halo 5's campaign is just pretty terrible, and thinking about the story now, not much really happens until the end of the game. There's not much compelling in the story to latch onto or root for, and then it just kind of suddenly ends like Halo 2 style, like an unnecessary cliffhanger. Looking at the other characters though, I did really enjoy Exuberant Witness for the time she was there, but that's about it. Absolutely hate immediately bringing back Cortana as an evil, weird bodysuit, cat person, whatever that was supposed to be. Right after her sacrifice in Halo 4, that was incredibly stupid, I think, to bring her back as just an evil villain. That cutscene did look really great though. The missions themselves also took a drop in quality, as they're not great. First thing that needs to be said is the absolutely horrible AI squad mechanic, and how frustrating it is when you get downed, and I just don't know what they were thinking with that. It's awful, and I do actually really like the idea of playing as all the members of Blue Team that we've been hearing about for years, and finally getting them in a game. It should have been awesome, but it just needs to be more well done. The first two missions of the game are fine, but don't really have any aspects that stand out. I do want to say though that that cutscene before Osiris is absolutely awesome, and I don't really have a problem with it. I thought Glass was a little more fun just because of the Scorpion section, but again, that's about it. Another feature of Halo 5's campaign were the guns down missions on Meridian and St. Helios. I see what they were going for, but I don't love it, and I don't think it really fits. If they were to experiment in Halo 6 with this idea a little bit more and maybe include full-on hub worlds or something like that, I might be a little more interested. I do actually really enjoy Unconfirmed just because of the setting inside the mine, and you get to use Nornfang, and I think it's really cool, and for some reason, I don't really know why, I just oddly enjoy that mission. Unfortunately, this is also where we get the first Warden Eternal fight, and just what happened. I was fine with it the first time, and I actually kind of like the idea of boss fights returning to Halo, but when it comes back again and again and again and again, it's just tedious and horrible, and it just gets so boring. I did think it was cool at first when you finally get to go to St. Helios, because we were all kind of speculating about that for years, and those missions are just fine. I did like the way they incorporated the breakable walls and things like that to complement the new Spartan abilities, and actually fighting with the Arbiter is cool, but again, it just feels like wasted potential and then they could have done so much more with it. Also, the Kraken fight is just so pathetic and such a terrible successor to the Scarab that I'm just not really sure what went wrong. Battle of Sunion I actually really like. It's got a great feeling to it through the music and tone and just everything happening. Visually, I love how the city looks, and it actually feels like a full-on war going on with all the fighting around you, and Arbiter eventually comes out to help, so that is really cool. While the mission objectives are pretty bland, just shooting the turrets, it definitely makes up for it with everything else going on in that mission. Obviously, running down the Guardian is pretty cool and definitely very surprising for the first time, but besides that, the rest of Genesis is pretty bare bones. It's enjoyable, but it lacks something really special that makes you want to play it over and over and over. The breaking I also think is pretty fun just because you're actually playing as Chief for one of the 3 missions in the next Halo game. In this Halo game, you're playing as Master Chief for 3 of the missions. It's got great music though. The story, as bad as it was, also really started to pick up there, which was nice. Then Guardians I actually think is a really solid mission. It's the only mission in the game with those great sandbox elements, and you can approach the objectives when you want, how you want. I actually just really like it overall. From a story perspective, it ends really terribly, but as a mission, it's pretty fun, and I'd say it's worth playing. So yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on this campaign and story since I already have reviews of it up on the channel. You can go find that if you want to look for it. And I think most people's thoughts are clear by now. The story is pretty bad and just could have been so much better. I do think there's a decent setup for Halo 6 now, with Cortana being in control of the Guardians, possibly a Halo ring, and the campaign is pretty disappointing from a mission standpoint, but there are some cool moments. Then again, nothing to make up for what this campaign ended up being when it finally released. My thoughts are honestly kind of mixed on Halo 5's multiplayer. I like the idea of going back to balanced arena starts, and I'm happy they removed loadouts. Overall, I think the movement system, including the Spartan abilities, works pretty well in terms of the game. It doesn't feel like Halo, but it works. I do think that mainly ground pound and Spartan charge definitely need to go. The main arena multiplayer is pretty solid from a gameplay standard and fun to play. However, the complete lack of modes and maps on the game release was just unexcusable, and even many of the ones they added in updates were just remixes of other Halo 5 maps. It sucks there wasn't one new vehicle added at launch besides the Phaeton, and really only one brand new vehicle they added in an update, which was the Wasp. It was great when they added in the content later, but it was ridiculous we had to wait months and months in the first place for modes that should have been there, like Griffball and Infection, and everything concerning the amount of multiplayer content in this game was pretty awful. I liked the idea of Warzone at first and thought it would be pretty cool. Initially the size of the maps blew me away and I loved playing it. However, it quickly got boring, especially with there only being 3 maps at launch. The other big problem was with the generic objectives and the bases on all the maps, and even the enemies were originally pretty boring and generic. However, Warzone as a whole was mainly dependent on the rec system and the power weapons you received. I didn't like the rec system, and I still don't like it, and how paying real money gets you power weapons faster, allowing you to do better in Warzone. There were also just an absurd amount of useless variant weapons, of loadout weapons that just felt stupid and unnecessary. I thought a lot of the power weapons themselves were cool and creative, but you might not ever be able to see them unless you get them in a rec pack by paying real money or just grinding an absurd amount of time. Also, the absurd prices they would charge after their content updates for the different rec packs was just ridiculous, and during the months of Mythic, I don't want to get into that, but that was ridiculous and just a horrible experience. And looking at the game now, Warzone is a good time, and there is a nice variety of modes and maps. However, again, that doesn't excuse anything that the game was in when it launched. I really enjoyed the addition of Breakout, but got frustrated when they constantly changed it every month for some reason. Big Team Battle is also pretty terrible considering it wasn't there at launch, and to this day only has Forge maps in it. Big Team Battle with no dev map should not ever be in a Halo game. The armor customization is absolutely terrible, with the amount of choices being severely limited. There was an unnecessary amount of armor variants, which really made it a pain to focus on the armors you wanted, and the fact that armor is solely dependent on RNG is completely stupid and something I really hope they change in Halo 6. I do really like the nice variety of weapon skins, but again, there wasn't much there at launch, so I can't really give it that much praise. The one great multiplayer aspect though was Forge, which was so well done, and it's so in-depth that it's actually kind of hard to jump into. It's still great though. And Theater Mode was pretty broken, and still is to this day. And obviously the exclusion of split screen was pretty terrible, and I hated that Firefight was now tied into Warzone, and again, of course, didn't come in an update, and there were 4 rec packs. I also really enjoyed the community-focused features such as the content browser being added. I think that's great and should also return in Halo 6. I do think it's fun and enjoyed some of the more experimental aspects of the game. Overall, the main problem was just how little content it contained and how poorly implemented the new aspects were. Today, I do think Halo 5 is a decent experience. You can play the campaign and have a decent amount of time going through the missions, and today there is a nice variety of multiplayer modes and maps. However, there is no excusing how the game launched in October of 2015, and that's something we'll unfortunately never forget. So yeah, those are my thoughts on all the Halo games. I know I didn't cover the RTSs, but I haven't really played them enough to formulate an opinion. CE Anniversary is just CE, but with the new graphics we already talked about, and Master Chief Collection I really like the idea of, but obviously it launched pretty terribly, and to this day is still a buggy, broken mess. So tell me in the comments below, out of the games that I did talk about, what is your favorite multiplayer and what is your favorite campaign? And thank you guys for watching Majestic Gaming.